And now chapter 13. Description of future Manus. Shukdev Goswami said, the present Manu, who is named Shradadeva, is the son of Vivasvan, the predominating deity on the sun planet. Shradadeva is the seventh Manu. Now please hear from me as I describe his sons. O King Pariksit, among the 10 sons of Manu are Ikshvaku, Nabhaga, Drishta, Sharyati, Narishyanta, and Nabhaga. The 7th son is known as Dishta. Then come Tarusha and Prishadra, and the 10th son is known as Vasuman. In this Manvantara, O King, the Adityas, the Vasus, the Rudras, the Vishvadevas, the Maruts, the 2 Ashvini Kumara brothers, and the Ribus are the demigods. Their head king, or Indra, is Purandara. Kashyapa, Atri, Vasishta, Vishvamitra, Gotama, Jamadagni, and Bharadvaj are known as the 7 sages. In this Manvantara, the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared as the youngest of all the Adityas, known as Vamana, the dwarf. His father was known as Kashyapa, and his mother Aditi. I have briefly explained to you the position of the 7 Manus. Now I shall describe the future Manus along with the incarnations of Lord Vishnu. O King, I have previously described in the 6th canto the 2 daughters of Vishvakarma named Samgya and Chaya, who were the first 2 wives of Vivasvan. It is said that the sun god had a 3rd wife named Vadava. Of the 3 wives, the wife named Samgya had 3 children, Yama, Yami, and Shradadeva. Now let me describe the children of Chaya. Chaya had a son named Savarni and a daughter named Tapati, who later became the wife of King Samvarana. Chaya's 3rd child is known as Shanaishchara, or Saturn. Vadava gave birth to 2 sons, namely the Ashvini brothers. O King, when the period of the 8th Manu arrives, Savarni will become the Manu. Nirmoka and Virajaska will be among his sons. In the period of the 8th Manu, among the demigods will be the Sutapas, the Virajas, and the Amritaprabhas. The king of the demigods, Indra, will be Bali Maharaj, the son of Virochana. Bali Maharaj gave a gift of 3 paces of land to Lord Vishnu, and because of this charity he lost all the 3 worlds. Later, however, when Lord Vishnu is pleased because of Bali's giving everything to him, Bali Maharaj will achieve the perfection of life. With great affection, the personality of Godhead bound Bali and then installed him in the kingdom of Sutala, which is more opulent than the heavenly planets. Maharaj Bali now resides on that planet and is more comfortably situated than Indra. O King, during the 8th Manvantara, the great personalities Galava, Diptiman, Parashuram, Ashvatthama, Kripacharya, Rishyashringa, and our father Vyasadeva, the incarnation of Narayan, will be the 7 sages. For the present, they are all residing in their respective ashrams. In the 8th Manvantara, the great powerful personality of Godhead, Sarvabhauma, will take birth. His father will be Devaguhya, and his mother will be Sarasvati. He will take the kingdom away from Purandara, or Lord Indra, and give it to Bali Maharaj. O King, the 9th Manu will be Daksha Savarni, who is born of Varuna. Among his sons will be Bhutaketu, and Deeptaketu. In this 9th Manvantara, the Paras and Marichigarbhas will be among the demigods. The king of heaven, Indra, will be named Adbhuta, and Dyutiman will be among the 7 sages. Rishabdev, a partial incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, will take birth from his father, Ayushman, and his mother, Ambudhara. He will enable the Indra named Adbhuta to enjoy the opulence of the 3 worlds. The son of Upashloka, known as Brahma Savarni, will be the 10th Manu. Purishena will be among his sons, and the Brahmins, headed by Havishman, will be the 7 sages. Havishman, Sukrita, Satya, Jaya, Murti, and others will be the 7 sages. The Suvasanas and Varudas will be among the demigods, and Shambhu will be their king, Indra. In the home of Vishvasrashta, a plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead will appear from the womb of Vishuchi as the incarnation known as Vishvaksena. He will make friends with Shambhu. In the 11th Manvantara, the Manu will be Dharma Savarni, who will be extremely learned in spiritual knowledge. From him there will come 10 sons headed by Satyadharma. The Vihangamas, Kamagamas, Nirvanaruchis, and others will be the demigods. The king of the demigods, Indra, will be Vaidrita, and the 7 sages will be headed by Aruna. The son of Aryaka, known as Dharmasetu, a partial incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, will appear from the womb of Vaidrita, the wife of Aryaka, and will rule the 3 worlds. O king, the 12th Manu will be named Rudra Savarni. Devavan, Upadeva, and Devashreshta will be among his sons. In this Manvantara, the name of Indra will be Ritadama, and the demigods will be headed by the Haritas. Among the sages will be Tapomurti, Tapasvi, and Agnidraka. From the mother named Sunrita and the father named Satyasaha will come Svadama, a partial incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He will rule that Manvantara. The 13th Manu will be named Deva Savarni, and he will be very advanced in spiritual knowledge. Among his sons will be Chitrasena and Vichitra. In the 13th Manvantara, the Sukarmas and Sutramas will be among the demigods. Divaspati will be the king of heaven, and Nirmoka and Tattvadarsha will be among the 7 sages. The son of Devahotra, known as Yogeshvar, will appear as a partial incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His mother's name will be Brihati. He will perform activities for the welfare of Divaspati. The name of the 14th Manu will be Indra Savarni. He will have sons like Uru, Gambhira, and Buddha. The Pavitras and Chakshushas will be among the demigods, and Shuchi will be Indra, the king of heaven. Agni, Bahu, Shuchi, Shuddha, Magda, and others of great austerity will be the 7 sages. O King Pariksit, in the 14th Manvantara, the Supreme Personality of Godhead will appear from the womb of Vitana, and his father's name will be Satrayana. This incarnation will be celebrated as Brihad Banu, and he will administer spiritual activities. O King, I have now described to you the 14 Manus appearing in the past, present, and future. The total duration of time ruled by these Manus is 1,000 Yuga cycles. This is called a kalpa, or 1 day of Lord Brahma. Thus ends the 13th chapter of the 8th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled Description of Future Manus. And now chapter 14, The System of Universal Management. Maharaj Parikshit inquired, O most opulent Shukdev Goswami, please explain to me how Manu and the others in each Manvantara are engaged in their respective duties, and by whose order they are so engaged. Shukdev Goswami said, The Manus, the sons of Manu, the great sages, the Indras, and all the demigods, O king, are appointed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his various incarnations, such as Yajna. O king, I have already described to you various incarnations of the Lord, such as Yajna. The Manus and others are chosen by these incarnations, under whose direction they conduct the universal affairs. At the end of every 4 yugas, the great saintly persons, upon seeing that the eternal occupational duties of mankind have been misused, re-establish the principles of religion. Thereafter, O king, the Manus, being fully engaged according to the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, directly re-establish the principles of occupational duty in its full 4 parts. To enjoy the results of sacrifices or yajnas, the rulers of the world, namely the sons and grandsons of Manu, discharge the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead until the end of Manu's reign. The demigods also share the results of these sacrifices. Indra, king of heaven, receiving benedictions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus enjoying highly developed opulences, maintains the living entities all over the 3 worlds by pouring sufficient rain on all the planets. In every yuga, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, assumes the form of siddhas, such as Sanaka, to preach transcendental knowledge. He assumes the form of great saintly persons, such as Yajnavalkya, to teach the way of karma, and he assumes the form of great yogis, such as Dattatreya, to teach the system of mystic yoga. In the form of Prajapati Marichi, the Supreme Personality of Godhead creates progeny. Becoming the king, he kills the thieves and rogues, and in the form of time, he annihilates everything. All the different qualities of material existence should be understood to be qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. People in general are bewildered by the illusory energy, and therefore they try to find the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through various types of research and philosophical speculation. Nonetheless, they are unable to see the Supreme Lord. In one kalpa, or one day of Brahma, there take place the many changes called vikalpas. O king, all of these have been previously described to you by me. Learned scholars who know the past, present, and future have ascertained that in one day of Brahma there are 14 Manus. Thus ends the 14th chapter of the 8th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled The System of Universal Management. And now chapter 15, Bali Maharaj Conquers the Heavenly Planets. Maharaj Parikshit inquired, The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the proprietor of everything. Why did he beg 3 paces of land from Bali Maharaj like a poor man? And when he got the gift for which he had begged, why did he nonetheless arrest Bali Maharaj? I am very much anxious to know the mystery of these contradictions. O king, when Bali Maharaj lost all his opulence and died in the fight, Shukracharya, a descendant of Bhrigu Muni, brought him back to life. Because of this, the great soul Bali Maharaj became a disciple of Shukracharya and began to serve him with great faith, offering everything he had. The Brahmin descendants of Bhrigu Muni were very pleased with Bali Maharaj, who desired to conquer the kingdom of Indra. Therefore, after purifying him and properly bathing him according to regulative principles, they engaged him in performing the yajna known as Vishvajit. When ghee, or clarified butter, was offered in the fire of sacrifice, there appeared from the fire a celestial chariot covered with gold and silk. There also appeared yellow horses, like those of Indra, and a flag marked with a lion. A gilded bow, 2 quivers of infallible arrows, and celestial armor also appeared. Bali Maharaj's grandfather, Prahlad Maharaj, offered Bali a garland of flowers that would never fade, and Shukracharya gave him a conch shell. When Maharaj Bali had thus performed the special ritualistic ceremony advised by the Brahmins, and had received, by their grace, the equipment for fighting, he circumambulated the Brahmins and offered them obeisances. He also saluted Prahlad Maharaj and offered obeisances to him. Then, after getting on the chariot given by Shukracharya, Bali Maharaj, decorated with a nice garland, put protective armor on his body, equipped himself with a bow, and took up a sword and a quiver of arrows. When he sat down on the seat of the chariot, his arms decorated with golden bangles and his ears with sapphire earrings, he shone like a worshipable fire. When he assembled with his own soldiers and the demon chiefs, who were equal to him in strength, opulence, and beauty, they appeared as if they would swallow the sky and burn all directions with their vision. After thus gathering the demoniac soldiers, Bali Maharaj departed for the opulent capital of Indra. Indeed, he seemed to make the entire surface of the world tremble. King Indra's city was full of pleasing orchards and gardens, such as the Nandana garden. Because of the weight of the flowers, leaves, and fruit, the branches of the eternally existing trees were bending down. The gardens were visited by pairs of chirping birds and singing bees. The entire atmosphere was celestial. Beautiful women, protected by the demigods, sported in the gardens, which had lotus ponds full of swans, cranes, chakravakas, and ducks. The city was surrounded by trenches full of Ganges water, known as Akasha Ganga, and by a high wall, which was the color of fire. Upon this wall were parapets for fighting. The doors were made of solid gold plates, and the gates were of excellent marble. These were linked by various public roads. The entire city had been constructed by Vishvakarma. The city was full of courtyards, wide roads, assembly houses, and not less than 100 million airplanes. The crossroads were made of pearl, and there were sitting places made of diamond and coral. Everlastingly beautiful and youthful women, who were dressed with clean garments, glittered in the city like fires with flames. They all possessed the quality of Shyama, or warm-bodied in winter, cool-bodied in summer, and firm-breasted. The breezes blowing in the streets of the city bore the fragrance of the flowers falling from the hair of the women of the demigods. Apsaras passed on the streets, which were covered with the white fragrant smoke of aguru incense, emanating from windows with golden filigree. The city was shaded by canopies decorated with pearls, and the domes of the palaces had flags of pearl and gold. The city always resounded with the vibrations of peacocks, pigeons, and bees, and above the city flew airplanes full of beautiful women who constantly chanted auspicious songs that were very pleasing to the ear. The city was filled with the sounds of mridangas, conch shells, kettle drums, flutes, and well-tuned stringed instruments, all playing in concert. There was constant dancing, and the Gandharvas sang. The combined beauty of Indrapuri defeated beauty personified. No one who is sinful, envious, violent toward other living entities, cunning, falsely proud, lusty or greedy could enter that city. The people who lived there were all devoid of these faults. Bali Maharaj, who was the commander of numberless soldiers, gathered his soldiers outside this abode of Indra and attacked it from all directions. He sounded the conch shell given him by his spiritual master, Shukracharya, thus creating a fearful situation for the women protected by Indra. Seeing Bali Maharaj's indefatigable endeavor, and understanding his motive, King Indra, along with the other demigods, approached his spiritual master, Brihaspati, and spoke as follows.
My lord, our old enemy Bali Maharaj has new enthusiasm, and he has obtained such astonishing power that we think that perhaps we cannot resist his prowess. No one anywhere can counteract this military arrangement of Bali's. It now appears that Bali is trying to drink up the entire universe with his mouth, lick up the 10 directions with his tongue, and raise fire in every direction with his eyes. Indeed, he has arisen like the annihilating fire known as Samvartaka. Kindly inform me, what is the cause for Bali Maharaj's strength, endeavor, influence, and victory? How has he become so enthusiastic? O Indra, I know the cause for your enemies becoming so powerful. The Brahmin descendants of Bhrigu Muni, being pleased by Bali Maharaj, their disciple, endowed him with such extraordinary power. Neither you nor your men can conquer the most powerful Bali. Indeed, no one but the Supreme Personality of Godhead can conquer him, for he is now equipped with the supreme spiritual power, or Brahma Tejas. As no one can stand before Yamaraj, no one can now stand before Bali Maharaj. Therefore, waiting until the situation of your enemies is reversed, you should all leave this heavenly planet and go elsewhere where you will not be seen. Bali Maharaj has now become extremely powerful because of the benedictions given him by the Brahmins. But when he later insults the Brahmins, he will be vanquished along with his friends and assistants.
The demigods, being thus advised by Brihaspati for their benefit, immediately accepted his words. Assuming forms according to their desire, they left the heavenly kingdom and scattered without being observed by the demons. When the demigods had disappeared, Bali Maharaj, the son of Virochana, entered the heavenly kingdom, and from there he brought the 3 worlds under his control. The Brahmin descendants of Bhrigu, being very pleased with their disciple, who had conquered the entire universe, now engaged him in performing 100 Ashvamedha sacrifices. When Bali Maharaj performed these sacrifices, he gained a great reputation in all directions throughout the 3 worlds. Thus he shone in his position like the brilliant moon in the sky. Because of the favor of the Brahmins, the great soul Bali Maharaj, thinking himself very satisfied, became very opulent and prosperous, and began to enjoy the kingdom.
Thus ends the 15th chapter of the 8th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled Bali Maharaj Conquers the Heavenly Planets. And now chapter 16, Executing the Payo-vrata Process of Worship. Shukdev Goswami said,
O king, when Aditi's sons, the demigods, had thus disappeared from heaven, and the demons had occupied their places, Aditi began lamenting, as if she had no protector. After many, many days, the great powerful sage Kashyapa Muni arose from a trance of meditation, and returned home to see the ashram of Aditi neither jubilant nor festive. O best of the Kurus, when Kashyapa Muni had been properly received and welcomed, he took his seat, and then spoke as follows to his wife Aditi, who is very morose.
O most gentle one, I wonder whether anything inauspicious has now taken place in regard to religious principles, the Brahmins, or the people in general, who are subject to the whims of death. O my wife, who are very much attached to household life, If the principles of religion, economic development, and satisfaction of the senses are properly followed in household life, one's activities are as good as those of a transcendentalist. I wonder whether there have been any discrepancies in following these principles. I wonder whether, because of being too attached to the members of your family, you fail to properly receive uninvited guests, who therefore were not welcomed and went away. Homes from which guests go away without having been received, even with an offering of a little water, are like those holes in the field which are the homes of jackals. O chaste and auspicious woman, when I left home for other places, were you in so much anxiety that you did not offer oblations of ghee into the fire? By worshipping the fire and the Brahmins, a householder can achieve the desired goal of residing in the higher planets, for the sacrificial fire and the Brahmins are to be considered the mouth of Lord Vishnu, who is the supersoul of all the demigods. O great-minded lady, are all your sons faring well? Seeing your withered face, I can perceive that your mind is not tranquil. How is this so?
O my respected Brahmin husband, all is well with the Brahmins, the cows, religion, and the welfare of other people. O master of the house, the three principles of Dharma, Artha, and Kama flourish in household life, which is consequently full of good fortune. O beloved husband, the fires, guests, servants, and beggars are all being properly cared for by me. Because I always think of you, there is no possibility that any of the religious principles will be neglected. O my Lord, since you are a Prajapati and are personally my instructor in the principles of religion, where is the possibility that all my desires will not be fulfilled? O son of Marichi, because you are a great personality, you are equal toward all the demons and demigods, who are born either from your body or from your mind, and who possess one or another of the three qualities, Sattva-guna, Rajoguna, or Tamo-guna. But although the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Controller, is equal toward all living entities, he is especially favorable to the devotees. Therefore, most gentle Lord, kindly favor your maidservant. We have now been deprived of our opulence and residence by our competitors, the demons. Kindly give us protection. The demons, our formidably powerful enemies, have taken away our opulence, our beauty, our fame, and even our residence. Indeed, we have now been exiled, and we are drowning in an ocean of trouble. O best of sages, best of all those who grant auspicious benedictions, please consider our situation and bestow upon my sons the benedictions by which they can regain what they have lost.
When Kashyapa Muni was thus requested by Aditi, he slightly smiled and said,
Alas, how powerful is the illusory energy of Lord Vishnu, by which the entire world is bound by affection for children. What is this material body made of 5 elements? It is different from the spirit soul. Indeed, the spirit soul is completely different from the material elements from which the body is made. But because of bodily attachment, one is regarded as a husband or a son. These illusory relationships are caused by misunderstanding. My dear Aditi, engage in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the master of everything, who can subdue everyone's enemies, and who sits within everyone's heart. Only that Supreme Person, Krishna or Vasudeva, can bestow all auspicious benedictions upon everyone, for he is the spiritual master of the universe. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is very merciful to the poor, will fulfill all of your desires, for devotional service unto him is infallible. Any method other than devotional service is useless. That is my opinion.
O Brahman, tell me the regulative principles by which I may worship the Supreme Master of the world, so that the Lord will be pleased with me and fulfill all my desires. O best of the Brahmins, kindly instruct me in the perfect method of worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead in devotional service, by which the Lord may very soon be pleased with me and save me, along with my sons, from this most dangerous condition.
When I desired offspring, I placed inquiries before Lord Brahma, who is born from a lotus flower. Now I shall explain to you the same process Lord Brahma instructed me, by which Keshava, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is satisfied. In the bright fortnight of the month of Phalguna, or February and March, for 12 days, ending with Dvadashi, one should observe the vow of subsisting only on milk, and should worship the lotus-eyed Supreme Personality of Godhead with all devotion. If dirt dug up by a boar is available on the day of the dark moon, one should smear this dirt on his body, and then bathe in a flowing river. While bathing, one should chant the following mantra. O Mother Earth, you are raised by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of a boar, because of your desiring to have a place to stay. I pray that you kindly vanquish all the reactions of my sinful life. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Thereafter, one should perform his daily spiritual duties, and then, with great attention, offer worship to the deity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and also to the altar, the sun, water, fire, and the spiritual master. The following prayers should be recited. O Supreme Personality of Godhead, greatest of all, who lives in everyone's heart, and in whom everyone lives, O witness of everything, O Vasudeva, supreme and all-pervading person, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, the Supreme Person. Being very subtle, you are never visible to material eyes. You are the knower of the 24 elements, and you are the inaugurator of the Sankhya Yoga system. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who have 2 heads, 3 legs, 4 horns, and 7 hands. I offer my obeisances unto you, whose heart and soul are the 3 Vedic rituals, Karmakanda, Jnanakanda, and Upasanakanda, and who expand these rituals in the form of sacrifice. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, Lord Shiva, or Rudra, who are the reservoir of all potencies, the reservoir of all knowledge, and the master of everyone. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who are situated as Hiranyagarbha, the source of life, the supersoul of every living entity. Your body is the source of the opulence of all mystic power. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who are the original personality of Godhead, the witness in everyone's heart, and the incarnation of Naranarayan Rishi in the form of a human being. O Personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. My Lord, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who are dressed in yellow garments, whose bodily hue resembles the Marakata gem, and who have full control over the goddess of fortune. O my Lord, Transcendental Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Adhokshaja. It is the best of all regulative principles, the best austerity, the best process of giving charity, and the best process of sacrifice. Therefore, my dear gentle lady, follow this ritualistic vow, strictly observing the regulative principles. By this process, the Supreme Person will very soon be pleased with you and will satisfy all your desires. Thus ends the 16th chapter of the 8th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled Executing the Payo-vrata Process of Worship. And now chapter 17. The Supreme Lord agrees to become Aditi's son. Shukdev Goswami said,
O King, after Aditi was thus advised by her husband, Kashyapa Muni, She strictly followed his instructions without laziness, and in this way performed the Payo-vrata ritualistic ceremony. With full, undiverted attention, Aditi thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and in this way brought under full control her mind and senses, which resembled forceful horses. She concentrated her mind upon the Supreme Lord, Vasudeva. Thus she performed the ritualistic ceremony known as Payo-vrata. My dear King, the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, dressed in yellow garments and bearing a conch shell, disc, club, and lotus in his 4 hands, then appeared before Aditi. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead became visible to Aditi's eyes, Aditi was so overwhelmed by transcendental bliss that she at once stood up and then fell to the ground like a rod to offer the Lord her respectful obeisances. Aditi stood silently with folded hands, unable to offer prayers to the Lord. Because of transcendental bliss, tears filled her eyes, and the hairs on her body stood on end. Because she could see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face, she felt ecstasy, and her body trembled. O Maharaj Pariksit, the demigoddess Aditi then began offering her prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in a faltering voice and with great love. She appeared as though drinking through her eyes the Supreme Lord, who is the husband of the Goddess of Fortune, the enjoyer of all sacrificial ceremonies, and the Master and Lord of the entire universe. The Goddess Aditi said, O Master and enjoyer of all sacrificial ceremonies, O infallible and most famous person, whose name, when chanted, spreads all good fortune, O original Supreme Personality of Godhead, Supreme Controller, shelter of all holy places, you are the shelter of all poor, suffering, living entities, and you have appeared to diminish their suffering. Please be kind to us and spread our good fortune. My Lord, you are the all-pervading universal form, the fully independent creator, maintainer, and destroyer of this universe. Although you engage your energy in matter, you are always situated in your original form and never fall from that position, for your knowledge is infallible and always suitable to any situation. You are never bewildered by illusion. O my Lord, let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you. O Unlimited One, if your Lordship is satisfied, one can very easily obtain a lifetime as long as that of Lord Brahma, a body either in the upper, lower, or middle planetary systems, unlimited material opulence, religion, economic development, and satisfaction of the senses, full transcendental knowledge, and the 8 yogic perfections, what to speak of such petty achievements as conquering one's rivals. O King Pariksit, best of the Bharat dynasty, when the lotus-eyed Lord, the supersoul of all living entities, was thus worshipped by Aditi, he replied as follows.
O Mother of the Demigods, I have already understood your long-cherished desires for the welfare of your sons, who have been deprived of all opulences and driven from their residence by their enemies. O Devi, O Goddess, I can understand that you want to regain your sons and be together with them to worship me after defeating the enemies in battle and retrieving your abode and opulences. You want to see the wives of the demons lamenting for the death of their husbands, when those demons, the enemies of your sons, are killed in battle by the demigods, of whom Indra is the chief. You want your sons to regain their lost reputation and opulence, and live again on their heavenly planet as usual. O Mother of the Demigods, in my opinion, almost all the chiefs of the demons are now unconquerable, for they are being protected by Brahmins, whom the Supreme Lord always favors. Thus the use of power against them now will not at all be a source of happiness. Yet, because I have been satisfied by the activities of your vow, O goddess Aditi, I must find some means to favor you, for worship of me never goes in vain, but certainly gives the desired result according to what one deserves. You have prayed to me and properly worshipped me by performing the great Payo-vrata ceremony for the sake of protecting your sons. Because of Kashyapa Muni's austerities, I shall agree to become your son and thus protect your other sons. Always thinking of me as being situated within the body of your husband, Kashyapa, go worship your husband, who has been purified by his austerity. O lady, even if someone inquires, you should not disclose this fact to anyone. That which is very confidential is successful if kept secret.
After speaking in this way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead disappeared from that very spot. Aditi, having received the extremely valuable benediction that the Lord would appear as her son, considered herself very successful, and with great devotion she approached her husband. Being situated in a meditational trance, Kashyapa Muni, whose vision is never mistaken, could see that a plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead had entered within him. O King, as the wind promotes friction between two pieces of wood, and thus gives rise to fire, Kashyapa Muni, whose transcendental position was fully absorbed in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, transferred his potency into the womb of Aditi. When Lord Brahma understood that the Supreme Personality of Godhead was now within the womb of Aditi, he began to offer prayers to the Lord by reciting transcendental names. Lord Brahma said,
O Supreme Personality of Godhead, all glories unto you, who are glorified by all, and whose activities are all uncommon. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, O Lord of the Transcendentalists, controller of the three modes of nature. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you again and again. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, the all-pervading Lord Vishnu, who have entered the cores of the hearts of all living entities. All the three worlds reside within your navel, yet you are above the three worlds. Formerly you appeared as the son of Prishni. To you, the Supreme Creator, who are understood only through Vedic knowledge, I offer my respectful obeisances. O my Lord, you are the beginning, the manifestation, and the ultimate dissolution of the three worlds, and you are celebrated in the Vedas as the reservoir of unlimited potencies, the Supreme Person. O my Lord, as waves attract branches and leaves that have fallen into deep water, you, the Supreme Eternal Time Factor, attract everything in this universe. My Lord, you are the original generator of all living entities, stationary or moving, and you are also the generator of the Prajapatis. O my Lord, as a boat is the only hope for a person drowning in the water, you are the only shelter for the demigods, who are now bereft of their heavenly position. Thus ends the 17th chapter of the 8th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled, The Supreme Lord Agrees to Become Aditi's Son. And now chapter 18, Lord Vamanadeva, the Dwarf Incarnation. Shukdev Goswami said,
After Lord Brahma had thus spoken, glorifying the Supreme Lord's activities and prowess, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is never subject to death like an ordinary living being, appeared from the womb of Aditi. His 4 hands were decorated with a conch shell, club, lotus, and disc. He was dressed in yellow garments, and his eyes appeared like the petals of a blooming lotus. The body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, blackish in complexion, was free from all inebrieties. His lotus face, decorated with earrings resembling sharks, appeared very beautiful, and on his bosom was the mark of Srivatsa. He wore bangles on his wrists, armlets on his arms, a helmet on his head, a belt on his waist, a sacred thread across his chest, and ankle bells decorating his lotus feet. An uncommonly beautiful garland of flowers decorated his bosom, and because the flowers were extremely fragrant, a large group of bees, making their natural humming sounds, invaded them for honey. When the Lord appeared, wearing the Kaustubha gem on his neck, his effulgence vanquished the darkness in the home of the Prajapati Kashyapa. At that time there was happiness in all directions, in the reservoirs of water like the rivers and oceans, and in the core of everyone's heart. The various seasons displayed their respective qualities, and all living entities in the upper planetary system, in outer space, and on the surface of the earth were jubilant. The demigods, the cows, the Brahmins, and the hills and mountains were all filled with joy. On the day of Shravana Dvadashi, the 12th day of the bright fortnight in the month of Bhadra, or August-September, when the moon came into the lunar mansion Shravana, at the auspicious moment of Abhijit, the Lord appeared in this universe. Considering the Lord's appearance very auspicious, all the stars and planets, from the sun to Saturn, were munificently charitable. O King, when the Lord appeared on Dvadashi, the 12th day of the moon, the sun was at the meridian, as every learned scholar knows. This Dvadashi is called Vijaya. Conch shells, kettle drums, panavas, and anakas vibrated in concert. The sound of these and various other instruments was tumultuous. Being very pleased, the celestial dancing girls, or apsaras, danced in jubilation. The best of the Gandharvas sang songs, and the great sages, demigods, Manus, Pitas, and fire gods offered prayers to satisfy the Lord. The Siddhas, Vidyadharas, Kimpurushas, Kinnaras, Charanas, Yakshas, Rakshasas, Suparnas, the best of serpents, and the followers of the demigods all showered flowers on Aditi's residence, covering the entire house, while glorifying and praising the Lord and dancing. When Aditi saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who had appeared from her own womb, having accepted a transcendental body by his own spiritual potency, she was struck with wonder and was very happy. Upon seeing the child, Prajapati Kashyapa exclaimed, "Jai, Jai," in great happiness and wonder. The Lord appeared in his original form, with ornaments and weapons in his hands. Although this ever-existing form is not visible in the material world, he nonetheless appeared in this form. Then, in the presence of his father and mother, he assumed the form of Vamana, a Brahmin dwarf, a brahmachari, just like a theatrical actor. When the great sages saw the Lord as the brahmachari dwarf, Vamana, they were certainly very pleased. Thus they placed before them Kashyapa Muni, the Prajapati, and performed all the ritualistic ceremonies, such as the birthday ceremony. At the sacred thread ceremony of Vamanadeva, the sun god personally uttered the Gayatri mantra. Brihaspati offered the sacred thread, and Kashyapa Muni offered a straw belt. Mother Earth gave him a deerskin, and the demigod of the moon, who is the king of the forest, gave him a Brahmadanda, the rod or staff of a brahmachari. His mother, Aditi, gave him cloth for underwear, and the deity presiding over the heavenly kingdom offered him an umbrella. O King, Lord Brahma offered a water pot to the inexhaustible Supreme Personality of Godhead. The 7 sages offered him kusha grass, and Mother Sarasvati gave him a string of Rudraksha beads. When Vamanadeva had thus been given the sacred thread, Kuvera, king of the Yakshas, gave him a pot for begging alms, and Mother Bhagavati, the wife of Lord Shiva and most chaste mother of the entire universe, gave him his first alms. Having thus been welcomed by everyone, Lord Vamanadeva, the best of the brahmacharis, exhibited his Brahman effulgence. Thus he surpassed in beauty that entire assembly, which was filled with great saintly Brahmins. After Lord Sri Vamanadeva set a sacrificial fire, he offered worship and performed a fire sacrifice on the sacrificial field. When the Lord heard that Bali Maharaj was performing Ashvamedha or horse sacrifices under the patronage of Brahmins belonging to the Bhrigu dynasty, the Supreme Lord, who is full in every respect, proceeded there to show his mercy to Bali Maharaj. By his weight he pushed down the earth with every step. While engaged in performing the sacrifice in the field known as Bhrigu Kacha, on the northern bank of the Narmada river, the Brahminical priests, the descendants of Bhrigu, saw Vamanadeva to be like the sun rising nearby. O king, because of Vamanadeva's bright effulgence, the priests, along with Bali Maharaj and all the members of the assembly, were robbed of their splendor. Thus they began to ask one another whether the sun god himself, Sanat Kumara, or the fire god, had personally come to see the sacrificial ceremony. While the priests of the Bhrigu dynasty and their disciples talked and argued in various ways, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vamanadeva, holding in his hands the rod, the umbrella, and a water pot full of water, entered the arena of the Ashvamedha sacrifice. Appearing as a Brahmin boy, wearing a belt of straw, a sacred thread, an upper garment of deer skin, and matted locks of hair, Lord Vamanadeva entered the arena of sacrifice. His brilliant effulgence diminished the brilliance of all the priests and their disciples, who thus stood from their seats and welcomed the Lord properly by offering obeisances. Bali Maharaj, jubilant at seeing Lord Vamanadeva, whose beautiful limbs contributed equally to the beauty of his entire body, offered him a seat with great satisfaction. Thus offering a proper reception to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is always beautiful to the liberated souls, Bali Maharaj worshipped him by washing his lotus feet. Lord Shiva, the best of demigods, who carries on his forehead the emblem of the moon, receives on his head with great devotion the Ganges water emanating from the toe of Lord Vishnu. Being aware of religious principles, Bali Maharaj knew this. Consequently, following in the footsteps of Lord Shiva, he also placed on his head the water that had washed the Lord's lotus feet. Bali Maharaj then said to Lord Vamanadeva,
O Brahmin, I offer you my hearty welcome and my respectful obeisances. Please let us know what we may do for you. We think of you as the personified austerity of the great Brahmin sages. O my Lord, because you have kindly arrived at our home, all my forefathers are satisfied. Our family and entire dynasty have been sanctified, and the sacrifice we are performing is now complete because of your presence. O son of a Brahmin, today the fire of sacrifice is ablaze according to the injunction of the Shastra, and I have been freed from all the sinful reactions of my life by the water that has washed your lotus feet. O my Lord, by the touch of your small lotus feet, the entire surface of the world has been sanctified. O son of a Brahmin, it appears that you have come here to ask me for something. Therefore, whatever you want, you may take from me. O best of those who are worshipable, you may take from me a cow, gold, a furnished house, palatable food and drink, the daughter of a Brahmin for your wife, prosperous villages, horses, elephants, chariots, or whatever you desire. Thus ends the 18th chapter of the 8th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Vamanadeva, the Dwarf Incarnation. And now chapter 19. Lord Vamanadeva begs charity from Bali Maharaj. Shukdev Goswami continued.
When the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vamanadeva, heard Bali Maharaj speaking in this pleasing way, he was very satisfied, for Bali Maharaj had spoken in terms of religious principles. Thus the Lord began to praise him. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "O King, you are indeed exalted because your present advisers are the Brahmins who are descendants of Bhrigu, and because your instructor for your future life is your grandfather, the peaceful and venerable Prahlad Maharaj. Your statements are very true, and they completely agree with religious etiquette. They are in keeping with the behavior of your family, and they enhance your reputation. I know that even until now, no one taking birth in your family has been poor-minded or miserly. No one has refused to give charity to Brahmins, nor after promising to give charity has anyone failed to fulfill his promise. O King Bali, never in your dynasty has the low-minded king been born, who, upon being requested, has refused charity to Brahmins in holy places, or a fight to Kshatriyas on a battlefield. And your dynasty is even more glorious due to the presence of Prahlad Maharaj, who is like the beautiful moon in the sky. It was in your dynasty that Hiranyaksha was born. Carrying only his own club, he wandered the globe alone, without assistance, to conquer all directions, and no hero he met could rival him. When delivering the earth from the Garbhodak sea, Lord Vishnu, in his incarnation as a boar, killed Hiranyaksha, who had appeared before him. The fight was severe, and the Lord killed Hiranyaksha with great difficulty. Later, as the Lord thought about the uncommon prowess of Hiranyaksha, he felt himself victorious indeed. When Hiranyakashipu heard the news of his brothers being killed, with great anger he went to the residence of Vishnu, the killer of his brother, wanting to kill Lord Vishnu. Seeing Hiranyakashipu coming forward, bearing a trident in his hand like personified death, Lord Vishnu, the best of all mystics and the knower of the progress of time, thought as follows: "Wheresoever I go, Hiranyakashipu will follow me, as death follows all living entities. Therefore, it is better for me to enter the core of his heart, for then, because of his power to see only externally, he will not see me." O King of the Demons, after Lord Vishnu made this decision, he entered the body of his enemy Hiranyakashipu, who was running after him with great force. In a subtle body inconceivable to Hiranyakashipu, Lord Vishnu, who was in great anxiety, entered Hiranyakashipu's nostril along with his breath. Upon seeing that the residence of Lord Vishnu was vacant, Hiranyakashipu began searching for Lord Vishnu everywhere. Angry at not seeing him, Hiranyakashipu screamed loudly and searched the entire universe, including the surface of the earth, the higher planetary systems, all directions, and all the caves and oceans. But Hiranyakashipu, the greatest hero, did not see Vishnu anywhere. Unable to see him, Hiranyakashipu said, "I have searched the entire universe, but I could not find Vishnu, who has killed my brother. Therefore, he must certainly have gone to that place from which no one returns. In other words, he must now be dead." Hiranyakashipu's anger against Lord Vishnu persisted until his death. Other people in the bodily concept of life maintain anger only because of false ego and the great influence of ignorance. Your father, Virochana, the son of Maharaja Prahlad, was very affectionate toward Brahmins. Although he knew very well that it was the demigods who had come to him in the dress of Brahmins, at their request he delivered to them the duration of his life. You also have observed the principles followed by great personalities who are householder Brahmins, by your forefathers, and by great heroes who are extremely famous for their exalted activities. O King of the Daityas, from your majesty, who come from such a noble family and who are able to give charity munificently, I ask only 3 paces of land to the measurement of my steps. O King, controller of the entire universe, although you are very munificent and are able to give me as much land as I want, I do not want anything from you that is unnecessary. If a learned Brahmin takes charity from others only according to his needs, he does not become entangled in sinful activities.
O son of a Brahmin, your instructions are as good as those of learned and elderly persons. Nonetheless, you are a boy, and your intelligence is insufficient. Thus you are not very prudent in regard to your self-interest. I am able to give you an entire island because I am the proprietor of the 3 divisions of the universe. You have come to take something from me and have pleased me by your sweet words, but you are asking only 3 paces of land. Therefore you are not very intelligent. O small boy, one who approaches me to beg something should not have to ask anything more anywhere. Therefore, if you wish, you may ask for me as much land as will suffice to maintain you according to your needs.
O my dear King, even the entirety of whatever there may be within the 3 worlds to satisfy one's senses cannot satisfy a person whose senses are uncontrolled. If I were not satisfied with 3 paces of land, then surely I would not be satisfied even with possessing one of the 7 islands consisting of 9 varshas. Even if I possessed 1 island, I would hope to get others. We have heard that although powerful kings like Maharaja Prithu and Maharaja Gaya achieved proprietorship over the 7 dvipas, they could not achieve satisfaction or find the end of their ambitions. One should be satisfied with whatever he achieves by his previous destiny, for discontent can never bring happiness. A person who is not self-controlled will not be happy, even with possessing the 3 worlds. Material existence causes discontent in regard to fulfilling one's lusty desires and achieving more and more money. This is the cause for the continuation of material life, which is full of repeated birth and death. But one who is satisfied by that which is obtained by destiny is fit for liberation from this material existence. A Brahmin who is satisfied with whatever is providentially obtained is increasingly enlightened with spiritual power, but the spiritual potency of a dissatisfied Brahmin decreases as fire diminishes in potency when water is sprinkled upon it. Therefore, O King, from you, the best of those who give charity, I ask only 3 paces of land. By such a gift I shall be very pleased, for the way of happiness is to be fully satisfied to receive that which is absolutely needed.
When the Supreme Personality of Godhead had thus spoken to Bali Maharaj, Bali smiled and told him, "All right, take whatever you like." To confirm his promise to give Vamanadeva the desired land, he then took up his water pot. Understanding Lord Vishnu's purpose, Shukracharya, the best of the learned, immediately spoke as follows to his disciple, who was about to offer everything to Lord Vamanadeva. Shukracharya said,
O son of Virochana, this brahmachari in the form of a dwarf is directly the imperishable Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. Accepting Kashyapa Muni as his father and Aditi as his mother, he has now appeared in order to fulfill the interests of the demigods. You do not know what a dangerous position you have accepted by promising to give him land. I do not think that this promise is good for you. It will bring great harm to the demons. This person, falsely appearing as a brahmachari, is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who has come in this form to take away all your land, wealth, beauty, power, fame, and education. After taking everything from you, he will deliver it to Indra, your enemy. You have promised to give him 3 steps of land in charity, but when you give it, he will occupy the 3 worlds. You are a rascal! You do not know what a great mistake you have made. After giving everything to Lord Vishnu, you will have no means of livelihood. How then shall you live? Vamanadeva will first occupy the 3 worlds with 1 step. Then he will take his 2nd step and occupy everything in outer space. And then he will expand his universal body and occupy everything. Where will you offer him the 3rd step? You will certainly be unable to fulfill your promise, and I think that because of this inability, your eternal residence will be in hell. Learned scholars do not praise that charity which endangers one's own livelihood. Charity, sacrifice, austerity, and fruitive activities are possible for one who is competent to earn his livelihood properly. They are not possible for one who cannot maintain himself. Therefore, one who is in full knowledge should divide his accumulated wealth in 5 parts: for religion, for reputation, for opulence, for sense gratification, and for the maintenance of his family members. Such a person is happy in this world and in the next. One might argue that since you have already promised, how can you refuse? O best of the demons, just take from me the evidence of the Vricha Shruti, which says that a promise is truthful preceded by the word Om, and untruthful if not. The Vedas enjoin that the factual result of the tree of the body is the good fruits and flowers derived from it. But if the bodily tree does not exist, there is no possibility of factual fruits and flowers. Even if the body is based on untruth, there cannot be factual fruits and flowers without the help of the bodily tree. When a tree is uprooted, it immediately falls down and begins to dry up. Similarly, if one doesn't take care of the body, which is supposed to be untruth, in other words, if the untruth is uprooted, the body undoubtedly becomes dry. The utterance of the word Om signifies separation from one's monetary assets. In other words, by uttering this word, one becomes free from attachment to money, because his money is taken away from him. To be without money is not very satisfactory, for in that position one cannot fulfill one's desires. In other words, by using the word Om, one becomes poverty-stricken. Especially when one gives charity to a poor man or beggar, one remains unfulfilled in self-realization and in sense gratification. Therefore, the safe course is to say no. Although it is a falsehood, it protects one completely. It draws the compassion of others toward oneself, and it gives one full facility to collect money from others for oneself. Nonetheless, if one always pleads that he has nothing, he is condemned, for he is a dead body while living, or while still breathing, he should be killed. In flattering a woman to bring her under control, in joking, in a marriage ceremony, in earning one's livelihood, when one's life is in danger, in protecting cows and Brahminical culture, or in protecting a person from an enemy's hand, falsity is never condemned.
Thus ends the 19th chapter of the 8th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Vamanadeva Begs Charity from Bali Maharaj. And now chapter 20. Bali Maharaj surrenders the universe. Sri Shukdev Goswami said,
O King Pariksit, when Bali Maharaj was thus advised by his spiritual master, Shukracharya, his family priest, he remained silent for some time, and then, after full deliberation, he replied to his spiritual master as follows.
As you have already stated, the principle of religion that does not hinder one's economic development, sense gratification, fame, and means of livelihood is the real occupational duty of the householder. I also think that this religious principle is correct. I am the grandson of Maharaja Prahlad. How can I withdraw my promise because of greed for money
when I have already said that I shall give this land? How can I behave like an ordinary cheater, especially toward a Brahmin? There is nothing more sinful than untruthfulness. Because of this, Mother Earth once said, I can bear any heavy thing except a person who is a liar. I do not fear hell, poverty, an ocean of distress, fall down from my position, or even death itself, as much as I fear cheating a Brahmin. My Lord, you can also see that all the material opulences of this world are certainly separated from their possessor at death. Therefore, if the Brahmin Vamanadeva is not satisfied by whatever gifts one has given, why not please him with the riches one is destined to lose at death? The Aditi, Shibi, and many other personalities were willing to sacrifice even their lives for the benefit of the people in general. This is the evidence of history. So why not give up this insignificant land? What is the serious consideration against it? O best of the Brahmins, certainly the great demoniac kings, who were never reluctant to fight, enjoyed this world, but in due course of time, everything they had was taken away, except their reputation, by which they continued to exist. In other words, one should try to achieve a good reputation instead of anything else. O best of the Brahmins, many men have laid down their lives on the battlefield, being unafraid of fighting, but rarely has one gotten the chance to give his accumulated wealth faithfully to a saintly person who creates holy places. By giving charity, a benevolent and merciful person undoubtedly becomes even more auspicious, especially when he gives charity to a person like your good self. Under the circumstances, I must give this little brahmachari whatever charity he wants from me. O great sage, great saintly persons like you, being completely aware of the Vedic principles for performing ritualistic ceremonies and yagyas, worship Lord Vishnu in all circumstances. Therefore, whether that same Lord Vishnu has come here to give me all benedictions, or to punish me as an enemy, I must carry out his order and give him the requested tract of land without hesitation. Although he is Vishnu himself, out of fear he has covered himself in the form of a Brahmin to come to me begging. Under the circumstances, because he has assumed the form of a Brahmin, even if he irreligiously arrests me, or even kills me, I shall not retaliate, although he is my enemy. If this Brahmin really is Lord Vishnu, who is worshipped by Vedic hymns, he would never give up his widespread reputation. Either he would lie down having been killed by me, or he would kill me in a fight.
Thereafter, the spiritual master, Shukracharya, being inspired by the Supreme Lord, cursed his exalted disciple Bali Maharaj, who was so magnanimous and fixed in truthfulness that instead of respecting his spiritual master's instructions, he wanted to disobey his order. Shukracharya said to him, "Although you have no knowledge, you have become a so-called learned person, and therefore you dare be so impudent as to disobey my order. Because of disobeying me, you shall very soon be bereft of all your opulence." Even after being cursed in this way by his own spiritual master, Bali Maharaj, being a great personality, never deviated from his determination. Therefore, according to custom, he first offered water to Vamanadeva, and then offered him the gift of land he had promised. Bali Maharaj's wife, known as Vindhyavali, who was decorated with a necklace of pearls, immediately came and had a large golden water pot brought there, full of water with which to worship the Lord by washing his feet. Bali Maharaj, the worshipper of Lord Vamanadeva, jubilantly washed the Lord's lotus feet, and then took the water on his head, for that water delivers the entire universe. At that time, the residents of the higher planetary system, namely the Demigods, the Gandharvas, the Vidyadharas, the Siddhas, and the Charanas, all being very pleased by Bali Maharaj's simple, non-duplicitous act, praised his qualities and showered upon him millions of flowers. The Gandharvas, the Kimpurushas, and the Kinnaras sounded thousands and thousands of kettle drums and trumpets again and again, and they sang in great jubilation, declaring how exalted a person is Bali Maharaj, and what a difficult task he has performed. Even though he knew that Lord Vishnu was on the side of his enemies, he nonetheless gave the Lord the entire 3 worlds in charity. The unlimited Supreme Personality of Godhead, who had assumed the form of Vamana, then began increasing in size, acting in terms of the material energy, until everything in the universe was within his body, including the earth, the planetary systems, the sky, the directions, the various holes in the universe, the seas, the oceans, the birds, beasts, human beings, the demigods, and the great saintly persons. Bali Maharaj, along with all the priests, acharyas, and members of the assembly, observed the Supreme Personality of Godhead's universal body, which was full of 6 opulences. That body contained everything within the universe, including all the gross material elements, the senses, the sense objects, the mind, intelligence, and false ego, the various kinds of living entities, and the actions and reactions of the 3 modes of material nature. Thereafter, Bali Maharaj, who was occupying the seat of King Indra, could see the lower planetary systems, such as Rasatala, on the soles of the feet of the Lord's universal form. He saw on the Lord's feet the surface of the globe, on the surface of his calves all the mountains, on his knees the various birds, and on his thighs the varieties of air. Bali Maharaj saw beneath the garments of the Lord, who acts wonderfully, the evening twilight. In the Lord's private parts he saw the Prajapatis, and in the round portion of the waist he saw himself with his confidential associates. In the Lord's navel he saw the sky, on the Lord's waist he saw the 7 oceans, and on the Lord's bosom he saw all the clusters of the stars. My dear king, on the heart of Lord Murari he saw religion, on the chest both pleasing words and truthfulness, in the mind the moon, on the bosom the goddess of fortune with a lotus flower in her hand, on the neck all the Vedas and all sound vibrations, on the arms all the demigods headed by King Indra, in both ears all the directions, on the head the upper planetary systems, on the hair the clouds, in the nostrils the wind, on the eyes the sun, and in the mouth fire. From his words came all the Vedic mantras. On his tongue was the demigod of water, Vamanadeva. On his eyebrows were the regulative principles, and on his eyelids were day and night. When his eyes were open, it was daytime, and when they were closed, it was night. On his forehead was anger, and on his lips was greed. O king, in his touch were lusty desires, in his semen were all the waters, on his back was irreligion, and in his wonderful activities or steps was the fire of sacrifice. On his shadow was death, in his smile was the illusory energy, and on the hairs of his body were all the drugs and herbs. In his veins were all the rivers, on his nails were all the stones, in his intelligence were Lord Brahma, the demigods, and the great saintly persons, and throughout his entire body and senses were all living entities, moving and stationary. Bali Maharaj thus saw everything in the gigantic body of the Lord. O king, when all the demons, the followers of Maharaj Bali, saw the universal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who held everything within his body, when they saw in the Lord's hand his disc known as the Sudarshan Chakra, which generates intolerable heat, and when they heard the tumultuous sound of his bow, all of these caused lamentation within their hearts. The Lord's conch shell, named Panchajanya, which made sounds like that of a cloud. The very forceful club, named Kamodaki. The sword named Vidyadhara, with a shield decorated with hundreds of moon-like spots. and also Akshaya Sayaka, the best of quivers. All of these appeared together to offer prayers to the Lord. These associates, headed by Sunanda and other chief associates, and accompanied by all the predominating deities of the various planets, offered prayers to the Lord, who wore a brilliant helmet, bracelets, and glittering earrings that resembled fish. On the Lord's bosom were the lock of hair called Srivatsa, and the transcendental jewel named Kaustuba. He wore a yellow garment covered by a belt, and he was decorated by a flower garland surrounded by bees. Manifesting himself in this way, O King, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose activities are wonderful, covered the entire surface of the earth with one footstep, the sky with his body, and all directions with his arms. As the Lord took his second step, he covered the heavenly planets, and not even a spot remained for the third step, for the Lord's foot extended higher and higher, beyond Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapoloka, and even Satyaloka.
Thus ends the 20th chapter of the 8th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled Bali Maharaj Surrenders the Universe. And now chapter 21, Bali Maharaj arrested by the Lord. Shukdev Goswami continued.
When Lord Brahma, who was born of a lotus flower, saw that the effulgence of his residence, Brahmaloka, had been reduced by the glaring effulgence from the toenails of Lord Vamanadeva, he approached the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Brahma was accompanied by all the great sages headed by Marichi, and by yogis like Sanandana, but in the presence of that glaring effulgence, O King, even Lord Brahma and his associates seemed insignificant. Among the great personalities who came to worship the lotus feet of the Lord were those who had attained perfection in self-control and regulative principles, as well as experts in logic, history, general education, and the Vedic literature known as kalpa, dealing with old historical incidents. Others were experts in the Vedic corollaries, like Brahma Samhita, all the other knowledge of the Vedas, such as the Sama, Yajur, Rig, and Atharva, and also the supplementary Vedic knowledge, such as Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, etc. Others were those who had been freed of the reactions to fruitive activities by transcendental knowledge, awakened by practice of yoga. And still others were those who had attained residence in Brahmaloka, not by ordinary karma, but by advanced Vedic knowledge. After devotedly worshipping the upraised lotus feet of the Supreme Lord with oblations of water, Lord Brahma, who was born of the lotus emanating from Lord Vishnu's navel, offered prayers to the Lord. O King, the water from Lord Brahma's Kamandalu washed the lotus feet of Lord Vamanadeva, who is known as Urukrama, the wonderful actor. Thus that water became so pure that it was transformed into the water of the Ganges, which went flowing down from the sky, purifying the three worlds like the pure fame of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Brahma and all the predominating deities of the various planetary systems began to worship Lord Vamanadeva, their Supreme Master, who had reduced himself from his all-pervading form to his original form. They collected all the ingredients and paraphernalia for this worship. They worshipped the Lord by offering fragrant flowers, water, padya and arghya, sandalwood pulp and aguru pulp, incense, lamps, fused rice, unbroken grains, fruits, roots, and sprouts. While so doing, they offered prayers indicating the glorious activities of the Lord and shouted, Jai, Jai. They also danced, played instruments, sang, sounded conch shells, and beat kettle drums, in this way worshipping the Lord. Jambavan, king of the bears, also joined in the ceremony. Sounding his bugle in all directions, he declared a great festival for Lord Vamanadeva's victory.
When the demoniac followers of Maharaja Bali saw that their master, who had been determined in performing sacrifice, had lost all his possessions to Vamanadeva, who had taken them away on the plea of begging 3 paces of land, they were very angry and spoke as follows.
This Vaman is certainly not a Brahmin, but the best of cheaters, Lord Vishnu. Assuming the form of a Brahmin, he has covered his own form, and thus he is working for the interests of the demigods. Our Lord Bali Maharaj, because of his position in performing the yajna, has given up the power to punish. Taking advantage of this, our eternal enemy, Vishnu, dressed in the form of a brahmachari beggar, has taken away all his possessions. Our Lord Bali Maharaj is always fixed in truthfulness, and this is especially so at present, since he has been initiated into performing a sacrifice. He is always kind and merciful toward the Brahmins, and he cannot at any time speak lies. Therefore, it is our duty to kill this Vamanadeva, Lord Vishnu. It is our religious principle and the way to serve our master.
After making this decision, the demoniac followers of Maharaj Bali took up their various weapons with a view to killing Vamanadeva. O king, the demons, aggravated by their usual anger, took their lances and tridents in hand, and against the will of Bali Maharaj, they pushed forward to kill Lord Vamanadeva. O king, when the associates of Lord Vishnu saw the soldiers of the demons coming forward in violence, they smiled. Taking up their weapons, they forbade the demons to continue their attempt. Nanda, Sunanda, Jaya, Vijaya, Prabala, Bala, Kumuda, Kumudaksha, Vivaksena, Patatvirat, or Garuda, Jayanta, Shrutadev, Pushpadanta, and Satvata were all associates of Lord Vishnu. They were as powerful as 10,000 elephants, and now they began killing the soldiers of the demons. When Bali Maharaj saw his own soldiers were being killed by the associates of Lord Vishnu, he remembered the curse of Shukracharya and forbade his soldiers to continue fighting. He said,
O Viprachiti, O Rahu, O Nemi, please hear my words. Don't fight. Stop immediately, for the present time is not in our favor. O Daityas, by human efforts, no one can supersede the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who can bring happiness and distress to all living entities. The Supreme Time Factor, which represents the Supreme Person, was previously in our favor and not in favor of the demigods, but now that same Time Factor is against us. No one can surpass the time representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by material power, by the council of ministers, by intelligence, by diplomacy, by fortresses, by mystic mantras, by drugs, by herbs, or by any other means. Previously, being empowered by providence, you defeated a great number of such followers of Lord Vishnu. But today, yes, today, those same followers, having defeated us, are roaring in jubilation like lions. Unless providence is in our favor, we shall not be able to gain victory. Therefore, we must wait for that favorable time when our defeating them will be possible.
O king, in accordance with the order of their master, Bali Maharaj, all the chiefs of the demons and the Daityas entered the lower regions of the universe, to which they were driven by the soldiers of Vishnu. Thereafter, on the day of Somapana, after the sacrifice was finished, Garuda, king of the birds, understanding the desire of his master, arrested Bali Maharaj with the ropes of Varuna. When Bali Maharaj was thus arrested by Lord Vishnu, who is the most powerful, there was a great roar of lamentation in all directions throughout the upper and lower planetary systems of the universe. O king, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vamanadeva, then spoke to Bali Maharaj, the most liberal and celebrated personality, whom he had arrested with the ropes of Varuna. Bali Maharaj had lost all bodily luster, but he was nonetheless fixed in his determination. The Lord said,
O king of the demons, you have promised to give me 3 steps of land, but I have occupied the entire universe with 2 steps. Now think about where I should put my 3rd. As far as the sun and moon shine with the stars, and as far as the clouds pour rain, all the land throughout the universe is in your possession. Of these possessions, with 1 step I have occupied Burloka, and with my body I have occupied the entire sky and all directions. And in your presence, with my 2nd step, I have occupied the upper planetary system. Because you have been unable to give charity according to your promise, the rule is that you should go down to live in the hellish planets. Therefore, in accordance with the order of Shukracharya, your spiritual master, now go down and live there. Far from being elevated to the heavenly planets or fulfilling one's desire, one who does not properly give a beggar what he has promised falls down to a hellish condition of life. Being falsely proud of your possessions, you promised to give me land, but you could not fulfill your promise. Therefore, because your promise was false, you must live for a few years in hellish life.
Thus ends the 21st chapter of the 8th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled Bali Maharaj Arrested by the Lord. And now chapter 22. Bali Maharaj surrenders his life. Shukdev Goswami said,
O king, although the Supreme Personality of Godhead was superficially seen to have acted mischievously toward Bali Maharaj was fixed in his determination. Considering himself not to have fulfilled his promise, he spoke as follows.
O best personality of Godhead, most worshipable for all the demigods, if you think that my promise has become false, I shall certainly rectify matters to make it truthful. I cannot allow my promise to be false. Please, therefore, place your 3rd lotus footstep on my head. I do not fear being deprived of all my possessions, living in hellish life, being arrested for poverty by the ropes of Varuna, or being punished by you as much as I fear defamation. Although a father, mother, brother, or friend may sometimes punish one as a well-wisher, they never punish their subordinate like this. But because you are the most worshipable Lord, I regard the punishment you have given me as most exalted. Since your lordship is indirectly the greatest well-wisher of us demons, you act for our best welfare by posing as if our enemy. Because demons like us always aspire for a position of false prestige, by chastising us, you give us the eyes by which to see the right path. Many demons who are continuously inimical toward you finally achieve the perfection of great mystic yogis. Your lordship can perform one work to serve many purposes, and consequently, although you have punished me in many ways, I do not feel ashamed of having been arrested by the ropes of Varuna, nor do I feel aggrieved. My grandfather, Prahlad Maharaj, is famous, being recognized by all in many ways by his father, Hiranyakashipu. He still remained faithful, taking shelter at your lotus feet. What is the use of the material body, which automatically leaves its owner at the end of life? And what is the use of all one's family members, who are actually plunderers, taking away money that is useful for the service of the Lord in spiritual opulence? What is the use of a wife? She is only the source of increasing material conditions. And what is the use of family, home, country, and community? Attachment for them merely wastes the valuable energy of one's lifetime. My grandfather, the best of all men, who achieved unlimited knowledge and was worshipable for everyone, was afraid of the common men in this world. Being fully convinced of the substantiality afforded by shelter at your lotus feet, he took shelter of your lotus feet against the will of his father and demoniac friends, who were killed by your own self. Only by providence have I been forcibly brought under your lotus feet and deprived of all my opulence. Because of the illusion created by temporary opulence, people in general who live under material conditions, facing accidental death at every moment, do not understand that this life is temporary. Only by providence have I been saved from that condition.
O best of the Kurus, while Bali Maharaj was describing his fortunate position in this way, the most dear devotee of the Lord, Prahlad Maharaj, appeared there, like the moon rising in the night time. Then Bali Maharaj saw his grandfather, Prahlad Maharaj, the most fortunate personality, whose dark body resembled black ointment for the eyes. His tall, elegant figure was dressed in yellow garments. He had long arms, and his beautiful eyes were like the petals of a lotus. He was very dear and pleasing to everyone. Being bound by the ropes of Varuna, Bali Maharaj could not offer befitting respect to Prahlad Maharaj as he had before. Rather, he simply offered respectful obeisances with his head, his eyes being inundated with tears, and his face lowered in shame. When the great personality Prahlad Maharaj saw that the Supreme Lord was sitting there, surrounded and worshipped by his intimate associates like Sunanda, he was overwhelmed with tears of jubilation. Approaching the Lord and falling to the ground, he offered obeisances to the Lord with his head. Prahlad Maharaj said,
My Lord, it is your lordship who gave this Bali the very great opulence of the post of heavenly king, and now today it is you who have taken it all away. I think you have acted with equal beauty in both ways. Because his exalted position as King of Heaven was putting him in the darkness of ignorance, you have done him a very merciful favor by taking away all his opulence. Material opulence is so bewildering that it makes even a learned, self-controlled man forget to search for the goal of self-realization. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, the Lord of the universe, can see everything by his will. Therefore I offer my respectful obeisances unto him.
O King Pariksit, Lord Brahma then began to speak to the Supreme Personality of Godhead within the hearing of Prahlad Maharaj, who stood nearby with folded hands. But Bali Maharaj's chaste wife, afraid and aggrieved at seeing her husband arrested, immediately offered obeisances to Lord Vamanadeva. She folded her hands and spoke as follows. Srimati Vindhyavali said, O my Lord, you have created the entire universe for the enjoyment of your personal pastimes. But foolish, unintelligent men have claimed proprietorship for material enjoyment. Certainly they are shameless agnostics. Falsely claiming proprietorship, they think they can give charity and enjoy. In such a condition, what good can they do for you, who are the independent creator, maintainer, and annihilator of this universe? Then Lord Brahma said,
O well-wisher and master of all living entities, O worshipable deity of all the demigods, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, now this man has been sufficiently punished, for you have taken everything. Now you can release him. He does not deserve to be punished more. Bali Maharaj had already offered everything to your lordship. Without hesitation, he has offered his land, the planets, and whatever else he earned by his pious activities, including even his own body. By offering even water, newly grown grass, or flower buds at your lotus feet, those who maintain no mental duplicity can achieve the most exalted position within the spiritual world. This Bali Maharaj, without duplicity, has now offered everything in the three worlds. How then can he deserve to suffer from arrest?
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Lord Brahma, because of material opulence, a foolish person becomes dull-witted and mad. Thus he has no respect for anyone within the three worlds and defies even my authority. To such a person I show special favor by first taking away all his possessions. while rotating in the cycle of birth and death again and again in different species because of his own fruitive activities, the dependent living entity, by good fortune, may happen to become a human being. This human birth is very rarely obtained. If a human being is born in an aristocratic family or a higher status of life, if he performs wonderful activities, if he is youthful, if he has personal beauty, a good education, and good wealth, and if he is nonetheless not proud of his opulences, it is to be understood that he is especially favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although aristocratic birth and other such opulences are impediments to advancement in devotional service, because they are causes of false prestige and pride, these opulences never disturb a pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bali Maharaj has become the most famous among the demons and non-believers, for in spite of being bereft of all material opulences, he is fixed in his devotional service. Although bereft of his riches, fallen from his original position, defeated and arrested by his enemies, rebuked and deserted by his relatives and friends, although suffering the pain of being bound, and although rebuked and cursed by his spiritual master, Bali Maharaj, being fixed in his vow, did not give up his truthfulness. It was certainly with pretension that I spoke about religious principles, but he did not give up religious principles, for he is true to his word. Because of his great tolerance, I have given him a place not obtainable even by the demigods. He will become king of the heavenly planets during the period of the Manu known as Sarani. Until Bali Maharaj achieves the position of king of heaven, he shall live on the planet Sutala, which was made by Vishvakarma according to my order. Because it is especially protected by me, it is free from mental and bodily miseries, fatigue, dizziness, defeat, and all other disturbances. Bali Maharaj, you may now go live there peacefully. O Bali Maharaj, you may go to the planet Sutala, which is desired even by the demigods. Live there peacefully, surrounded by your friends and relatives. All good fortune unto you. On the planet Sutala, not even the predominating deities of other planets, what to speak of ordinary people, will be able to conquer you. As far as the demons are concerned, if they transgress your rule, my disc will kill them. O great hero, I shall always be with you and give you protection in all respects, along with your associates and paraphernalia. Moreover, you will always be able to see me there. Because there you will see my supreme prowess, your materialistic ideas and anxieties that have arisen from your association with the demons and Danavas will immediately be vanquished.
Thus ends the 22nd chapter of the 8th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled Bali Maharaj Surrenders His Life. And now chapter 23. The demigods regain the heavenly planets. Shukdev Goswami said,
When the supreme, ancient, eternal personality of Godhead had thus spoken to Bali Maharaj, who is universally accepted as a pure devotee of the Lord, and therefore a great soul, Bali Maharaj, his eyes filled with tears, his hands folded, and his voice faltering in devotional ecstasy, responded as follows. Bali Maharaj said,
What a wonderful effect there is in even attempting to offer respectful obeisances to you. I merely endeavored to offer you obeisances, but nonetheless, the attempt was as successful as those of pure devotees. The causeless mercy you have shown to me, a fallen demon, was never achieved even by the demigods or the leaders of the various planets.
After speaking in this way, Bali Maharaj offered his obeisances first to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari, and then to Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. Thus he was released from the bondage of the Naga Pasha, or the ropes of Varuna, and in full satisfaction he entered the planet known as Sutala. Thus having delivered the proprietorship of the heavenly planets to Indra, and having fulfilled the desire of Aditi, mother of the demigods, the Supreme Personality of Godhead ruled the affairs of the universe. When Prahlad Maharaj heard how Bali Maharaj, his grandson and descendant, had been released from bondage and had achieved the benediction of the Lord, he spoke as follows in a tone of greatly ecstatic devotion.
O Supreme Personality of Godhead, you are universally worshipped. Even Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva worship your lotus feet. Yet, although you are such a great personality, you have kindly promised to protect us, the demons. I think that such kindness has never been achieved even by Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, or the goddess of fortune Lakshmi, what to speak of other demigods or common people. O supreme shelter of everyone, great personalities like Brahma enjoy their perfection simply by tasting the honey of rendering service at your lotus feet. But as for us, who are all rogues and debauchees born of an envious family of demons, how have we received your mercy? It has been possible only because your mercy is causeless. O my Lord, your pastimes are all wonderfully performed by your inconceivable spiritual energy. And by her perverted reflection, the material energy, you have created all the universes. As the supersoul of all living entities, you are aware of everything, and therefore you are certainly equal toward everyone. Nonetheless, you favor your devotees. This is not partiality, however, for your characteristic is just like that of a desire tree, which yields everything according to one's desire.
My dear son Prahlad, all good fortune unto you. For the time being, please go to the place known as Sutala, and there enjoy happiness with your grandson and your other relatives and friends. You shall be able to see me there in my usual feature with conch shell, disc, club, and lotus in my hand. Because of your transcendental bliss due to always personally seeing me, you will have no further bondage to fruitive activities. Accompanied by Bali Maharaj, my dear King Pariksit, Prahlad Maharaj, the master of all the chiefs of the demons, took the Supreme Lord's order on his head with folded hands. After saying yes to the Lord, circumambulating him and offering him respectful obeisances, he entered the lower planetary system known as Sutala. Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, thereafter addressed Shukracharya, who was sitting nearby in the midst of the assembly with the priests. O Maharaj Pariksit, these priests were all Brahmavadis, followers of the Vedic principles for performing sacrifices. The Lord said, O best of the Brahmins, Shukracharya, please describe the fault or discrepancy in your disciple Bali Maharaj, who engaged in performing sacrifices. This fault will be nullified when judged in the presence of qualified Brahmins.
My Lord, you are the enjoyer and lawgiver in all performances of sacrifice, and you are the Yajna Purusha, the person to whom all sacrifices are offered. If one has fully satisfied you, where is the chance of discrepancies or faults in his performances of sacrifice? There may be discrepancies in pronouncing the mantras and observing the regulative principles, and moreover there may be discrepancies in regard to time, place, person, and paraphernalia. But when your Lordship's holy name is chanted, everything becomes faultless. Lord Vishnu, I must nonetheless act in obedience to your order because obeying your order is most auspicious and is the first duty of everyone.
In this way, the most powerful Shukracharya accepted the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with full respect. Along with the best Brahmins, he began to compensate for the discrepancies in the sacrifices performed by Bali Maharaj. O King Pariksit, thus having taken all the land of Bali Maharaj by begging, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vamanadeva, delivered to his brother Indra all the land taken away by Indra's enemy. Lord Brahma,
the master of King Daksha and all other Prajapatis, accompanied by all the demigods, the great saintly persons, the inhabitants of Pitraloka, the Manus, the Munis, and such leaders as Daksha, Bhrigu, and Angira, as well as Kartikeya and Lord Shiva, accepted Lord Vamanadeva as the protector of everyone. He did this for the pleasure of Kashyapa Muni and his wife Aditi, and for the welfare of all the inhabitants of the universe, including their various leaders. O King Pariksit, Indra was considered the king of all the universe, but the demigods, headed by Lord Brahma, wanted Upendra, Lord Vamanadeva, as the protector of the Vedas, the principles of religion, fame, opulence, auspiciousness, vows, elevation to the higher planetary system, and liberation. Thus they accepted Upendra, Lord Vamanadeva, as the supreme master of everything. This decision made all living entities extremely happy. Thereafter, along with all the leaders of the heavenly planets, Indra, the king of heaven, placed Lord Vamanadeva before him and, with the approval of Lord Brahma, brought him to the heavenly planet in a celestial airplane. Indra, king of heaven, being protected by the arms of Vamanadeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thus regained his rule of the three worlds and was reinstated in his own position, supremely opulent, fearless, and fully satisfied. Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Lord Kartikeya, the great sage Bhrigu, other saintly persons, the inhabitants of Pitraloka, and all other living entities present, including the inhabitants of Siddhaloka and living entities who travel in outer space by airplane, all glorified the uncommon activities of Lord Vamanadeva. O King, while chanting about and glorifying the Lord, they returned to their respective heavenly planets. They also praised the position of Aditi. O Maharaja Pariksit, pleasure of your dynasty, I have now described to you everything about the wonderful activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vamanadeva. Those who hear about this are certainly freed from all the results of sinful activities. One who is subject to death cannot measure the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Trivikram, Lord Vishnu, any more than he can count the number of atoms on the entire planet Earth. No one, whether born already or destined to take birth, is able to do this. This has been sung by the great sage Vasishta. If one hears about the uncommon activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his various incarnations, he is certainly elevated to the higher planetary system, or even brought back home, back to Godhead. Whenever the activities of Vamanadeva are described in the course of a ritualistic ceremony, whether the ceremony be performed to please the demigods, to please one's forefathers in Pitraloka, or to celebrate a social event like a marriage, that ceremony should be understood to be extremely auspicious.
Thus ends the 23rd chapter of the 8th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled, The Demigods Regain the Heavenly Planets. And now chapter 24, Matsya, the Lord's Fish Incarnation. Maharaj Pariksit said, The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is eternally situated in his transcendental position, yet he descends to this material world and manifests himself in various incarnations. His first incarnation was that of a great fish. O most powerful Shukdev Goswami, I wish to hear from you the pastimes of that fish incarnation. What was the purpose for which the Supreme Personality of Godhead accepted the abominable form of a fish, exactly as an ordinary living being accepts different forms under the laws of karma? The form of a fish is certainly condemned and full of terrible pain. O my Lord, what was the purpose of this incarnation? Kindly explain this to us, for hearing about the pastimes of the Lord is auspicious for everyone. Sutta Goswami said, When Pariksit Maharaj thus inquired from Shukdev Goswami, that most powerful saintly person began describing the pastimes of the Lord's incarnation as a fish. Sri Shukdev Goswami said,
O King, For the sake of protecting the cows, Brahmins, demigods, devotees, the Vedic literature, religious principles, and principles to fulfill the purpose of life, the Supreme Personality of Godhead accepts the forms of incarnations. Like the air passing through different types of atmosphere, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although appearing sometimes as a human being and sometimes as a lower animal, is always transcendental. Because he is above the material modes of nature, he is unaffected by higher and lower forms. O King Pariksit, at the end of the past millennium, at the end of Brahma's day, because Lord Brahma sleeps during the night, annihilation took place, and the three worlds were covered by the water of the ocean. At the end of Brahma's day, when Brahma felt sleepy and desired to lie down, the Vedas were emanating from his mouth, and the great demon named Hayagriva stole the Vedic knowledge. Understanding the acts of the great demon Hayagriva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who is full of all opulences, assumed the form of a fish and saved the Vedas by killing the demon. During the Chakshusha Manvantara, there was a great king named Satyavrata, who was a great devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Satyavrata performed austerities by subsisting only on water. In this, the present millennium, King Satyavrata later became the son of Vivasvan, the king of the sun planet, and was known as Shradadeva. By the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he was given the post of Manu. One day, while King Satyavrata was performing austerities by offering water on the bank of the river Kritamala, a small fish appeared in the water in his palms. Satyavrata, the king of Dravida Desha, threw the fish into the water of the river along with the water in his palm, O King Pariksit, descendant of Bharat. With an appealing voice, the poor small fish said to King Satyavrata, who was very merciful, "My dear king, protector of the poor, why are you throwing me in the water of the river, where there are other aquatics who can kill me? I am very much afraid of them." To please himself, King Satyavrata, not knowing that the fish was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, decided with great pleasure to give the fish protection. The merciful king, being moved by the pitiable words of the fish, placed the fish in a water jug and brought him to his own residence. But in one night that fish grew so much that he could not move his body comfortably in the water of the pot. He then spoke to the king as follows. "O my dear king, I do not like living in this water pot with such great difficulty. Therefore, please find some better reservoir of water where I can live comfortably." Then, taking the fish out of the water pot, the king threw him in a large well. But within a moment, the fish developed to the length of 3 cubits, or about 5 feet. The fish then said, "My dear king, this reservoir of water is not fit for my happy residence. Please give me a more extensive pool of water, for I have taken shelter of you." O Maharaj Pariksit, the king took the fish from the well and threw him in a lake, but the fish then assumed a gigantic form, exceeding the extent of the water. The fish then said, "O king, I am a large aquatic, and this water is not at all suitable for me. Now kindly find some way to save me. It would be better to put me in the water of a lake that will never reduce." When thus requested, King Satyavrata took the fish to the largest reservoir of water. But when that also proved insufficient, the king at last threw the gigantic fish into the ocean. While being thrown in the ocean, the fish said to King Satyavrata, "O hero, in this water there are very powerful and dangerous sharks that will eat me. Therefore, you should not throw me in this place." After hearing these sweet words from the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of a fish, the king, being bewildered, asked him,
"Who are you, sir? You simply bewilder us." "My lord, in one day you have expanded yourself for hundreds of miles, covering the water of the river and the ocean. Before this, I had never seen or heard of such an aquatic animal." My Lord, you are certainly the inexhaustible Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan Sri Hari. It is to show your mercy to the living entities that you have now assumed the form of an aquatic. O my Lord, Master of creation, maintenance, and annihilation, O best of enjoyers, Lord Vishnu, you are the leader and destination of surrendered devotees like us. Therefore, let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you. All your pastimes and incarnations certainly appear for the welfare of all living entities. Therefore, my Lord, I wish to know the purpose for which you have assumed this form of a fish. O my Lord, possessing eyes like the petals of a lotus, the worship of the demigods, who are in the bodily concept of life, is fruitless in all respects. But because you are the supreme friend and dearmost super soul of everyone, worship of your lotus feet is never useless. You have therefore manifested your form as a fish.
When King Satyavrata spoke in this way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who at the end of the Yuga had assumed the form of a fish to benefit his devotee and enjoy his pastimes in the water of inundation, responded as follows.
O King, who can subdue your enemies, on the 7th day from today, the 3 worlds, Bhu, Bhuva, and Sva, will all merge into the water of inundation. When all the 3 worlds merge into the water, a large boat sent by me will appear before you. Thereafter, O King, you shall collect all types of herbs and seeds, and load them on that great boat. Then, accompanied by the 7 rishis, and surrounded by all kinds of living entities, you shall get aboard that boat, and without moroseness you shall easily travel with your companions on the ocean of inundation, the only illumination being the effulgence of the great rishis. Then as the boat is tossed about by the powerful winds, attach the vessel to my horn by means of the great serpent Vasuki, for I shall be present by your side. Pulling the boat with you and all the rishis in it, O King, I shall travel in the water of devastation until the night of Lord Brahma's slumber is over. You will be thoroughly advised and favored by me, and because of your inquiries, everything about my glories, which are known as Param Brahma, will be manifest within your heart. Thus you will know everything about me.
After thus instructing the king, the Supreme Personality of Godhead immediately disappeared. Then King Satyavrata began to wait for that time of which the Lord had instructed. After spreading Kusha, with its tips pointing east, the saintly king, himself facing the northeast, sat down on the grass and began to meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, who had assumed the form of a fish. Thereafter gigantic clouds pouring incessant water swelled the ocean more and more. Thus the ocean began to overflow onto the land and inundate the entire world. As Satyavrata remembered the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he saw a boat coming near him. Thus he collected herbs and creepers, and, accompanied by saintly Brahmins, he got aboard the boat. The saintly Brahmins, being pleased with the king, said to him, O King, please meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Keshava. He will save us from this impending danger and arrange for our well-being. Then, while the king constantly meditated upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a large golden fish appeared in the ocean of inundation. The fish had 1 horn and was 8 million miles long. Following the instructions formally given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the king anchored the boat to the fish's horn, using the serpent Vasuki as a rope. Thus, being satisfied, he began offering prayers to the Lord. The king said,
By the grace of the Lord, those who have lost their self-knowledge since time immemorial, and who because of this ignorance are involved in a material, conditional life full of miseries, obtain the chance to meet the Lord's devotee. I accept that Supreme Personality of Godhead as the Supreme Spiritual Master. In hopes of becoming happy in this material world, the foolish conditioned soul performs fruitive activities that result only in suffering. But by rendering service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one becomes free from such false desires for happiness. May my Supreme Spiritual Master cut the knot of false desires from the core of my heart. One who wants to be free of material entanglement should take to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and give up the contamination of ignorance involving pious and impious activities. Thus, one regains his original identity, just as a block of gold or silver sheds all dirt and becomes purified when treated with fire. May that inexhaustible Supreme Personality of Godhead become our spiritual master, for he is the original spiritual master of all other spiritual masters. Neither all the demigods, nor the so-called gurus, nor all other people, either independently or together, can offer mercy that equals even 1/10,000th of yours. Therefore, I wish to take shelter of your lotus feet. As a blind man, being unable to see, accepts another blind man as his leader, people who do not know the goal of life accept someone as a guru who is a rascal and a fool. But we are interested in self-realization. Therefore, we accept you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as our spiritual master, for you are able to see in all directions and are omniscient like the sun. A materialistic so-called guru instructs his materialistic disciples about economic development and sense gratification, and because of such instructions, the foolish disciples continue in the materialistic existence of ignorance. But your lordship gives knowledge that is eternal, and the intelligent person receiving such knowledge is quickly situated in his original constitutional position. My Lord, you are the supreme well-wishing friend of everyone, the dearmost friend, the controller, the supersoul, the supreme instructor, and the giver of supreme knowledge, and the fulfillment of all desires. But although you are within the heart, the foolish, because of lusty desires in the heart, cannot understand you. O Supreme Lord, for self-realization I surrender unto you, who are worshipped by the demigods as the supreme controller of everything. By your instructions, exposing life's purpose, kindly cut the knot from the core of my heart, and let me know the destination of my life.
When Satyavrata had thus prayed to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who had assumed the form of a fish, the Lord, while moving in the water of inundation, explained to him the absolute truth. The Supreme Personality of Godhead thus explained to King Satyavrata the spiritual science known as Sankhya Yoga, the science by which one distinguishes between matter and spirit, in other words, Bhakti Yoga, along with the instructions contained in the Puranas, or the old histories, and the Samhitas. The Lord explained himself in all these literatures. While sitting in the boat, King Satyavrata, accompanied by the great saintly persons, listened to the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in regard to self-realization. These instructions were all from the eternal Vedic literature. Thus the king and sages had no doubt about the absolute truth. At the end of the last inundation, during the period of Svayambhuva Manu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead killed the demon named Hayagriva and delivered all the Vedic literatures to Lord Brahma when Lord Brahma awakened from sleeping. King Satyavrata was illuminated with all Vedic knowledge by the mercy of Lord Vishnu, and in this period he has now taken birth as Vaivasvata Manu, the son of the sun god. This story concerning the great King Satyavrata and the fish incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, is a great transcendental narration. Anyone who hears it is delivered from the reactions of sinful life. One who narrates this description of the Matsya incarnation and King Satyavrata will certainly have all his ambitions fulfilled, and he will undoubtedly return home back to Godhead. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who pretended to be a gigantic fish,
who restored the Vedic literature to Lord Brahma when Lord Brahma awakened from sleep, and who explained the essence of Vedic literature to King Satyavrata and the great saintly persons.
Thus ends the 24th chapter of the 8th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled Matsya, the Lord's Fish Incarnation. And this ends the 8th canto.